Allegiance. Tom Badow, who's the oil patch chaplain, will be here to lead us in the invocation. Afterwards, I'll ask Councilman Gary Mars to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Would everyone please stand?
You know, the Lord instructed us to pray for our leaders, so that's what we'll do this morning. Father, you did command us that we should pray for our leaders, and so we do that this morning, giving you honor and glory, but to pray for wisdom for these that lead the city, that in all that they do, the things that they have to decide, God, that they will seek you, and the wisdom will come from you, and this city will continue in its great history in moving forward. So we thank you for this, and we pray it in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, it is time for us to honor our March 2011 Rotary Club Oklahoma City Teacher of the Month. But she's teaching this morning and is not with us. So without a whole lot of fanfare, I'll just ask for a motion in a second. And we will honor Nita Surritt as the March 2011 Rotary Club Oklahoma City Teacher of the Month, and we're proud of her. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously, and we will get this resolution to her. It is also that time of year when we remind everyone just how fortunate we are to have invested in such a fine telecommunications system for public safety in our 911. And we have here today a group of people from our 911. First of all, David Shoup is the 911 director, but I'd ask everyone to come up. Tom Krug, Mickey Carney, Tyler Reisman, Stephanie Van Noort, and Kathleen Munden, if you all would come forward. Did I forget somebody? Jenna West is here too. Okay. Everybody's listed now. We have a resolution, or proclamation. I'll ask the clerk to read it and we'll get settled.
Whereas emergencies can occur at any time that require police, fire, or emergency medical services, and whereas when an emergency occurs, the prompt response of police officers and firefighters are dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from citizens who telephone the Oklahoma City Emergency Communications Center. Whereas public safety dispatchers and call takers are the first and most critical contact our citizens have with emergency services. Public safety dispatchers are the single vital link for our police officers by monitoring their activities by radio, providing them information, and ensuring their safety. Whereas public safety dispatchers and call takers of the Oklahoma City Police Department have contributed substantially to the apprehension of criminals, suppression of fires, and treatment of patients. Whereas each public safety dispatcher and call taker has exhibited compassion, understanding, and professionalism during the performance of their job in the last year. Whereas a recent example of the commitment of public safety dispatchers and call takers to the safety of our community was their willingness to work unusually long hours and in some cases spend their off-duty time at the Emergency Communications Center during the snowstorm occurring January 31st through February 2nd. Now therefore, Mick Cornett, the mayor of the city of Oklahoma City, does hereby proclaim April 10th through 16th, 2011 as National Telecommunications Week in Oklahoma City.
Let's show our appreciation for our 911 workers. And I will just say that we employ a lot of people who have hard jobs. And boy, these people are in that group. You don't have to know everything to be a 911 operator. It just probably seems that way. The amount of different types of calls that you're expected to be able to handle and control is unfathomable to me. And I know we put you through a lot of training, and I hope those dollars are well invested. I hear great reports when people need 911 that the services are handled quickly, efficiently, and help is on the way. So thank you on behalf of the citizens of Oklahoma City for everything you do, not just this week, but 52 weeks out of the year. Thank you very much. Let's show our appreciation.
Mayor, if I could, just a second. We've come such a long way in our public safety communications. It's fitting that there's a history exhibit going on down in the next floor down. I can remember my grandfather, who's the deputy fire chief, telling me he used to have to carry change around in his pocket because the only way they could communicate back to find out if there was another fire to go to was to get a payphone and call back. And so, I mean, we've come a long way since then. But the thing that's remarkable about the 911 people is that every person that calls thinks that theirs is the most important call there ever is or ever was. And they don't understand all the thousands of other calls that are coming in and they're having to deal with. So it's a remarkable feat that they get through all of that without less turmoil, with less turmoil than people would suspect on it. So it's an admirable job and one that they do very well at our center.
Well, and the citizens have invested heavily in a first-rate 911 system, and so in the event that they need it, it's there for them. But sometimes it goes below the radar screen. It's just one of those things you assume is being taken care of, and it is, but it's not without great care and a whole lot of training that those people go through. You're absolutely right. It's spring, and time for us once again to pick up all the trash that has been roaming around our city. So Terry Trashosaurus is here. Terry, I was glad you'd come by. Come on up. And Mother Earth is here, as well as other employees of Oklahoma City Beautiful, our city's partner for this wonderful event. We have a proclamation. I'll ask the clerk to read it as we get settled. Terry, come on over here.
Whereas litter is a critical factor in our city's economic health, and a clean city reduces taxpayers' costs to remove the litter and attract new businesses. Whereas Oklahoma City Beautiful and the City of Oklahoma City are teaming up for Litter Blitz 2011. Whereas Litter Blitz 2011 is an effort to clean up neighborhoods, parks, streets, and businesses to help beautify Oklahoma City. Neighborhood, civic, church, and business groups can register their team to pick up litter on a date they choose. Each team will receive a packet with free trash bags, gloves, and tips for a safe and successful cleanup. Whereas last year, over 9,000 volunteers participated in the community cleanup. Now, therefore, Mick Cornett, the mayor of the City of Oklahoma City, does hereby proclaim April 2011 as Litter Blitz 2011 Days in Oklahoma City, and he urges all citizens to help combat litter not only in their own neighborhoods, but throughout all areas of our city.
Let's show our appreciation to Oklahoma City Beautiful and Oklahoma City is a very giving community, so the idea that we have 9,000 people who are willing to donate their time and help clean up litter does not necessarily surprise me. But can you imagine trying to organize 9,000 people to pick up litter? And that's where Oklahoma City Beautiful comes in so beautifully. So thank you all very much, and I'm going to hand the microphone and let you all encourage people to get out and get involved.
We want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, and City Council members. You all have been avid supporters of us for as long as I can remember, and we really appreciate it. Without you guys, we couldn't do half of what we do. Thank you very much. We have been around collecting litter and having Litter Blitz campaigns for 40 years now, ever since Oklahoma City Beautiful was established. And as at this point we have over 8,000 volunteers, we're pretty confident that we're going to go over our 9,000 and probably have around 10,000 volunteers this year. That is a lot of people out there collecting trash. We do give the bags. We give tips, gloves. You know, you've got to have gloves. You don't want that DNA. There's no way we want that DNA. But it's really actually kind of fun to pick up the trash because afterwards you see what a difference you have made in our city. The economic development part of it is astounding. We all need to be responsible for helping keep this beautiful city beautiful. And you can register. You yourselves can be a part of it by going to the website okcbeautiful.com or call 525-8822. We want to thank our sponsors, Chesapeake Energy, the Oklahoma Heart Hospital, the City of Oklahoma City, and especially you, Mr. Mayor, for continuing to support all of our programs. And we would like you to accept a Litter Blitz T-shirt. So you can pick up trash and everybody knows what you're doing. You are official. We're talking trash in April.
Thank you very much. And what do people need to do if they want to be involved in Litter Blitz?
They just need to go to www.okcbeautiful.com, and they can register there or call 525-8822.
Okay. And this is a wonderful project for church groups and scout groups and neighborhood organizations who are looking to get involved. And you can choose where you pick up the trash. So you're not going to be assigned to go somewhere where you're not comfortable going. You're going to be able to choose where you go, but they will provide you with some very necessary details and help you organize the event and show up in a very professional manner. And you're going to be glad you did, and certainly the city's going to benefit from it. So, yes?
Well, and if somebody doesn't know where they want to pick up trash, they have places that community groups get together and they can join. You as an individual can join in with that group. There are lots of opportunities to pick up trash around here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mother Earth, great to see you again. Terry, as always, thanks very much. See you. What a round of applause for Oklahoma City.
Mayor, may I ask for just a small out-of-order matter?
That depends what it is, but go ahead. Sure.
Well, Sam was supposed to do this.
Well, I asked him to wait until items from council because it wasn't on the agenda. If you want to do it now, I don't think it's going to cause havoc in the courtroom.
I appreciate it.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes. You know, this past week, since we're doing recognizing people for their accomplishments and their programs, you know, this past week, one of the great programs for the city of Oklahoma City for young people opened the doors to the new First Tee program in Northeast Oklahoma City at the corner of 4th and Martin Luther King. And there's two people that I just don't think has really gotten the recognition that they deserve in reference to the hard work and the passion and the commitment that they have had over the years in developing the First Tee program in Oklahoma City. And you know, it's amazing when you serve in a position and you start a program of trying to accomplish a change, and you're there to see it happen and to see the full opening of the doors. And so we have, you know, those two individuals who are still with us, Councilwoman Willa Johnson, who's now the Commissioner for District 1, is here, and Sam and I thought about this yesterday, and so he put me in the hot seat. But I would just like to recognize, you know, the fact that the new First Tee program, their own facility that has been housed prior to this past weekend at the James Stewart Golf Course, they now have a brand new developed, you know, building and a golf course, the practice golf course that they can recognize as far as the young people in Oklahoma City and the state of Oklahoma. So that's Ms. Martin and Commissioner Willa Johnson.
We ask him to come up with just a minute, Mayor. Well, you haven't been back to say a word to us for a while, you know, and it was probably eight years ago, sitting on the council, you had this dream, and you and Debbie together became the dream of the city council. And you had an idea for 10 or 15 kids back there 8 years ago, and you know, I understand from the dedication the other night we're going to be looking at 350 to maybe 500 kids this summer participating in this program. And it is, just as Councilman Kelly said, it is a gorgeous, not just facility, But the grounds, the putting green, Mayor, I don't know whether that was sprayed the night before. There's no more beautiful facility than this little 3-hole course and putting green, and it's just a dream fulfilled after so many years. And we just wanted to say thank you to both of you. Debbie, it's a passion and it's more than golf. It's about children, and both your passion for children, particularly children in need, that you two live for. And as I left there the other night, I said, every time I drive by this new facility, it's going to be a reminder to me of Willa Johnson, Debbie Martin's passion and commitment and dedication to the children of our community. So we appreciate so much what you've done in the name of Oklahoma City, and it's only going to get bigger and better for certain. So Willa, we'd like to just a word from you.
I never pass up a chance to talk. I just have to tell you how much I appreciate the support that I got from the City Council. We all are dreamers. I think most of us, we have some of those little small dreams come true. But those that really dream big, it's a great big thing to get them done. But if you're smart, you give it to somebody that can get it done. I am just a dreamer. I knew that all kids weren't big enough to play football, all kids weren't tall enough to play basketball, that there needed to be some diversification in the recreational needs of children. And I have always liked golf, never been a golfer, I'm just a flogger. And but I wanted to bring this sport to kids who wouldn't ordinarily have an opportunity to do it. We had trial and error so many times because we had other people who had accepted the charge to get it done. And through those trials and errors, one time I said, Debbie, they're not going to get this done. We got to get this done. And she said, oh, well, don't worry about it. We'll get it done. So, look, voila, we got it done. And she has passionately and worked hard. This woman has worked as hard, if you can imagine, on the first tee program as she had for the city. And I know how hard she worked for the city because she was my assistant at the time, and I worked like a Trojan because I had so much to do. So I want to say congratulations to Debbie Martin. Thank you for helping my dream come true. Come on here, girl. Say something.
Well, I'm really privileged, Mayor. Obviously, you've been on our board for a long time. Gary, Sam. It takes a lot of leadership. It takes a strong commitment. And we've had an incredibly generous community that has made this possible. The facility was $1.6 million. We had commitments of $2 million. The building is completely paid for. Now it's just a matter of how do we address the increasing cost of maintenance and an increased budget of about $250,000 a year. But already one foundation has stepped up and said, we want to make this a part of our programming for the year. So I know that there is an incredible vision here to reach children and to change lives. So I'm just ever so blessed to be a part of that.
And if people are unclear about the First Tee facility and where it's located, it's just to the south of Douglas High School, and it's a beautiful facility. I assume it's the best in the country for all the First Tee chapters that exist across the United States. If it's not, it's got to be first or second. And I only qualify that because I haven't seen the others. But I can't imagine there's a better one. And it's large, it's nice, and it's much more than golf. I mean, First Tee teaches character, and it uses the sport of golf to draw kids out there, but then it teaches a lot of character perspectives as part of its mission. So it's a wonderful program. We're grateful to, as Willa and Debbie pointed out, many philanthropists in the city came forward to help us fund this. And I'll say one other thing, that that entire Jimmy Stewart facility exists because of the passion of Willa Johnson, and it was what predates any of us on the council. But if there's an art to telling Willa no, I've never learned it. And Willie gets things done. Did then, still doing it now, and the citizens are benefiting from it. And of course, Debbie's been there right with her the entire way. So thank you both for what you've done. Any other mentions from council on this? All right, we're on item 4 of the council agenda, and this is the Journal of Council Proceedings. Item 4A is to receive the Journal of Council Proceedings for March 22nd, and item 4B is to approve the Journal of Council Proceedings for March 15th. We have a motion and a second. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. And item 5 is request for uncontested continuances.
Mr. Mayor, on page 11, under item 8F1, item I-1, Northeast 36th Street, we ask that that be stricken. There is now a new owner. Moving on to page 12, under item 8G1A, 2928 Fons Hill Avenue, that needs to be stricken. The owner has secured. Item B, 7404 Wirewood Lane, that needs to be stricken. The owner has secured. And finally, item J, 637 Northeast 29th Street, that needs to be stricken. Again, the owner has secured.
All right, any other requests? Any other requests for uncontested continuances? We'll recess the council meeting, convene as the Oklahoma City Municipal Facilities Authority. Looks like there is, 4 items. All right, we have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions about the MFA? All right, cast your votes. Passes unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCMFA, convene as the Oklahoma City Public Property Authority.
Mayor?
Yes?
Would it be all right if we separated item D and voted on that separately,
Certainly.
please?
How about a motion then on item A, B, and C?
Second.
All right? All right.
On the items that relate to the golf courses, any of those projects, will any of those projects impact the compensation or the income of the managers of the golf courses, pros we have out there?
I'm not trying to understand your question.
We're asking for some things that affect the golf courses'
Yes.
operation.
Annual operate, yeah.
Yeah. And will any of those items have any impact on the compensation that our managers, the pros out there, earn?
Certainly indirect.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, if we have nicer driving range balls, that there might be more people that would use the driving range because of that, which may affect.
Are they then involved in the evaluation of these of the bids, the specifications and whatnot?
I don't know that. Wendell, do you?
Well, I would hope so. I mean,
I would
they're
too.
the experts, so
I'm
would
sorry,
hope
sir,
they're
I didn't hear
involved.
your question.
Well, Wendell, we've got 3 projects in our PPA agenda that have to do with the golf courses.
Yes, sir.
Some additional equipment, computer software, and the like. And my question was, will these projects, as they go forward, impact at all the compensation or the income that our pros get from running the courses?
Not directly, but I believe, as Mr. Couch was
Okay.
intimating, the better the
So
golf.
there is an indirect impact. Do they have a say-so in how these things are awarded or specifications?
Yes, sir. The golf pros are involved in the review process.
Okay, good. That's a tough question. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
We'll be voting on the PPA items A, B, and C. Ready to go? All right, cast your votes. It passes unanimously. Entertain a motion for item D on the PPA. Comments or questions on item D? All right, cast your votes. It passes unanimously. We'll adjourn the OCPPA and reconvene the council meeting with the consent docket. All right, we have a motion and a second on the consent docket. Like there's 24 items. Any individual considerations?
On I, R, then a comment on a W.
Okay. Anybody else want to get in line? Well, Pat, while they're looking it over, why don't you jump in on item I?
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. This is a project in Ward 1, and it has to do with the road construction project. And we have a change order for a message board. And I was curious as to, is this not something that the contractor would normally be required to put in, warning signs that...
This had to do with the intersection of Britton Road and, I believe, County Line Road. The original plans and specifications call for that intersection to be built in quarters, quarter at a time. We've had significant delays on the project, and in order to expedite the project, we had conversations with the contractor about closing the intersection to allow them to build it all at once to try to help speed up the process. And in doing so, it required to let citizens know about that the road was going to be closed, and so these message boards were required. So it was not a part of the original plan.
And Dennis, the message boards that are acquired, are they rented or are purchased? And if they're purchased, are they the property of the city then or the contractor?
They are not purchased, they are rented.
Okay.
I don't believe that they're our property. I think we rented them from another company.
Okay. And the other thing is, I think the wording needs to be straightened out a little bit. It said change order number 2, which is the message board in a $9,000 project, adds 142 additional working days. And I think that maybe that's a little bit confusing, that message board in and of itself does not cause 142 extra working days, I would hope.
That's correct, it does not.
So I think the wording maybe needs to be tightened up a little bit. On number R, 6R, this is a resolution. We declare some firefighting equipment obsolete, and we donate it to another fire department. In that process, is the city indemnified against any failures of that equipment?
I can't answer that, but we can get that back to you on that, Mr. Ryan.
Because I would think that would be a risk that we would not want to assume if
I think that's correct.
piece of equipment. And then on W, I just would like to point out that Ward 8 is part of the Magic Kingdom, obviously. This is a recognition of a donation from Wild Birds Unlimited for some installations at Martin Park Nature Center. And the wording indicates that the items will be appreciated by the birds, squirrels, and the Martin Nature Park visitors. And the squirrels might not like it because one of the items is a squirrel baffle, so they may not be totally appreciative of it. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. Any other comments or questions on the consent docket? All right, ready to go. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. On to the concurrence docket, a couple of items. Any individual consideration on the Economic Development Trust items? All right, cast your votes. Passed unanimously. We're on to item 8. These are items that require a separate vote. We'll start with a series of zoning cases. The first is in Ward 3. The address is 501 North Cemetery Road. It's currently a planned unit development, and it would become a new one. Larry?
Thank you, Your Honor. Is the applicant present? Okay, there were no protests there were protests at the Planning Commission. Has anyone signed up? Hearing none, I move for approval.
All right, we have a motion and a second. We're voting on item 8A. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8B is also in Ward 3. It's at 6400 Southwest 44th Street. Larry?
Yes, has anyone signed up to protest on this? I move for approval.
All right, motion and a second. We're voting on item 8B. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Let's see. We need to vote on item 8B 1 and 2, don't we? Okay. Larry, you want to move ahead with a motion on item 8B 2?
Yeah, again, I move for approval.
All right, cast your votes. And it passed unanimously. On to item 8C, which is in Ward 7. And this is to close an alley in the Maywood addition. Skip?
Haven't received any protests in reference to this, Mayor, so I would ask that we move it.
Second.
All right, cast your votes on item 8C1. And it passes unanimously. Item 8C2 is in Ward 3, and again, it's to close a portion of a platted water line easement. Larry?
Yes, has anyone signed up to protest on this? I move for approval.
Second.
Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 8D is from the Traffic Commission. This is for some angled parking on Northwest 24th Street near Western Avenue. Sam?
Thank you, Mayor. It's across the street from the former post office there, and it's 12 parking spaces that we get to replace parallel parking at no cost to the city. I don't think there's any concern or protest. Is there any here today? Move for approval.
All right, we're voting on item 8D. Cast your votes. Passes unanimously. Item 8E is intended to bring us in conformance with state law. Chief City is here, in the building at least. Oh, there he is. He had his head turned. Chief, you want to come forward and tell us about 8E?
Yes, the changes are merely to bring it in compliance with the Oklahoma state statutes. The change, specifically the biggest change, is that it just eliminates for a person to become an officer, a police officer, they have to be a citizen of the United States and of this state. It strikes "and of this state" because we do want to accept applicants outside the state and trying to get the best applicants possible. And the other is just that they have to be a member of the pension system, which they've always had to be. It just it strikes out the 35-year requirement, which is a requirement of the state pension system. So we just struck that and made them just have to be a member of the pension system.
Okay. Everyone clear on this? All right. Motion on item 8F. Any comments or questions from anyone else? All right, cast your votes. It passes unanimously. On to item 8F. This is a public hearing regarding dilapidated structures. Has anyone signed up to speak on any of these items on item 8F? Looks like we have one. Kathy Ward, would you come forward, please? Hi, good morning. And Kathy, it indicates you're here to speak on item 8F1A, which is in Ward 5. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And I will need you to say your name and address for the record.
Okay. My name is Kathy Ward. I'm president of the John Glenn No. 2 Neighborhood Watch. My address is 3201 South Meadow.
Okay, and Councilman Walters can lead you through the process here.
So you don't own this property, ma'am?
I'm sorry?
Do you own this property?
No, I do not own it.
Go ahead.
Well, as the neighborhood president, we've been dealing with this home for 20 years, trying to either get it repaired or fixed or something. We as the neighborhood feel that this property has had ample time to make any kind of repairs and make this a home, make this house a home and a viable part of our neighborhood. We've been trying to clean up our neighborhood and improve the quality of our neighborhood area. Our concerns are that the owners will only make minor and necessary repairs in order to satisfy city codes, as this has been done over and over for the last 20 years. This home is not only an eyesore but a health and safety hazard, as we would like to see either this house become a viable, livable part of our neighborhood or be torn down. And I would like to thank Mr. Howard, the inspector. I've talked to him and worked with him, and also our councilman, Mr. Walters, and also your staff, Mr. Mayor, especially Mr. Wickenkamp, for all their help on this matter and helping me. That's all I had.
Charles, do we have is there a documented history of notices and then they bring it into compliance barely?
Well, we've been in contact with the owner, and they do have an intent to repair, but as you can see, they really don't live up to their promises. That's why we should leave it on, and if they don't actively start repairing it, we will remove it.
Has this property ever gotten to this stage before under the dilapidated structures list?
I don't believe it has.
Okay. Ma'am, basically, if we leave this on, which we will, it's going to be declared dilapidated, and they'll have to make major improvements in the next 30 days, or the city will hire a contractor to tear the property down.
Okay, so 30 days, and if there's no improvement or anything, then...
Yeah, they'll have 30 days to work with our staff. Based on the history, that may take some convincing. But at the end of 30 days, if staff's not convinced, the city will start the project of a demolition.
Okay.
The staff has some discretion on how they handle some of these. But don't think that in 30 days you're going to see a bulldozer parked in the front yard. It probably is going to happen. I can imagine. But they will have to make some major improvements and major progress for that not to happen. So we'll go ahead and leave it on this morning.
And because I think at one time I'm just, my neighbor that lives right directly to the east of that home, they had told me at one time it had been on a dilapidated list. And the problem is they just go out there and do enough, and then we're right back in the same situation. And it's been 20 years.
Well, my guess is that staff is going to have very little grace at this point with these folks. So they'll have to make major improvements to the property.
Okay, because the owner does, as far as I know, lives in San Diego, California. So, they're not even in our community or in our city or state even. And so it's very frustrating as a neighborhood and, as a neighborhood watch area. And we're trying to, clean up our neighborhood and, improve. And it's very hard when you have something like this in your neighborhood. So,
All right. Well, thanks for coming down and taking an interest.
Thank you, ma'am.
thank you.
Any other comments or questions on any item listed under 8F regarding dilapidated structures? All right, sounds like we're good to go. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8G is a public hearing regarding unsecured structures. We have a handful of people who have signed up to speak. Michael Ferrara. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning.
Yeah, Michael, we'll need your name and address for the record.
My name is Michael Ferrara. My address is 6824 Umbrian Road, number 124. On that, I put the address of the Lakewood Apartments.
Okay, and so the property you want to speak on is 8G1C, which is 7806 Lyrewood Lane in Ward 1.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. My name is Michael Ferrara. I'm a project manager for Vanguard Properties. Vanguard Properties owns and operates Lakewood Park. And I was here today to let you know that, we received the notice to secure the buildings and windows at the property. And I wanted to show, we have some pictures here to show the progress has been made, and we are very close to finishing, hopefully today or tomorrow.
Okay. Councilman Morris can help you.
Okay. Charles, have you documented that they started working on this?
They've started work on it. We've had really good relations with Vanguard. They've lived up to everything they've told us so far, so we don't foresee them not correcting it now.
Well, as long as you keep making the improvements and progress, and as long as you stay in touch with staff, then we won't take any further action on it.
We absolutely will, and I really thank you guys, ladies and gentlemen.
And I got to say, personally, I'm very pleased with the improvements that have been made in the area.
Thank you.
And well needed, but yeah, don't get it to this point again.
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming down, Michael.
Thanks.
I think there was 2 other members from our apartment complex that were going to speak, but I guess in this
It doesn't
regard,
appear to
won't
be necessary. No.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, won't we just vote them all in at one time? Correct. Okay. KT Weaver?
They're leaving.
Oh, I see. So all 3 of these are the other 2. Okay. All right. So we have a motion and a second, and we're ready to vote. Any other comments or questions about the list of unsecured structures? All right. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8H, right-of-way use permits. And Peter DeLisi and Angela Cosby are here from the Arts Council of Oklahoma. You 2 want to come forward and tell us about the Festival of the Arts, which is coming up.
While they're coming up, Mayor, I'll inform council that I have to step out as president of the Arts Council. I'm the one that signed the request for this revocable, but for the staff, please don't take my leaving the room as any indication I don't support the Festival of the Arts. I've got a wonderful event coming up this year.
Well, it would be really hard for us to take his leaving the room as not being support, since he's our board president. He spends countless hours working with us every day, and much of his time is spent away from here over at our office, helping us work through all the details. And I can't begin to tell you how much we appreciate the work that the city has done to keep us, the Arts Council of Oklahoma City, up to speed on what's going on with all the construction projects that literally surround our facility. And we've been invited to meetings where we get to actually talk with all the various people who run those construction projects and with your Project 180 coordinators, and they've done an exceptional job of helping us feel at ease that everything is really getting taken care of in a timely fashion, and that, yes, we will have the Arts Festival, which will start on April 26th. And I'm just really pleased about that. The work that you're doing down here is just unparalleled. It is absolutely fabulous what the park is going to look like, the myriad gardens and the surrounding streets, and the scope of this project is just astonishing to me. And it's going to do so much to improve the quality of life in downtown Oklahoma City and for all of us as citizens, and certainly for us as the Arts Council of Oklahoma City. And I honestly can't thank you enough for your support of us in that respect. I'd like to introduce Angela Cosby, who's going to tell you a little bit about the festival this year.
Okay.
Thank you, Peter. Mayor Cornett, City Manager Couch, members of the council, thank you so much for your support of this celebration of the visual, culinary, and performing arts. This year, the festival will feature nearly 200 visual artists. 144 artists will be on Hudson. We have 20 of your favorite local artists in our South Hudson Gallery. They've been teamed with local community leaders to create a pro-am exhibit. We'll have over 300 performing arts on 4 stages, and of course the food. Some of your favorite food vendors will be returning, including Iguana Mexican Grill, Deep Fork Grill, Strawberries Newport, and then we welcome a new food vendor, Grand Slam Grill, featuring some wonderful Cajun specialties. One thing that we're really excited about is the Festival of the Arts is entering year 2 of a 5-year Go Green initiative. We've been recognized locally and nationally for our green efforts, and I think by the end of 5 years, we'll be one of the greenest events in the nation. So please mark your calendars. April 26, 11 a.m. is opening ceremonies. Directly following, we'll have a lunch in your honor. You'll each receive an invitation in the mail so you can come and celebrate the festival and enjoy some of our wonderful festival food. Thank you.
Angie, could you tell us a little bit about the parking situation? I know folks are a little bit concerned.
Well, with our volunteers, we have nearly 500 committee members recruiting 5,000 volunteers. Our 500 committee members are offered parking in the I-40 lots and then also the Cox Convention Centers. And then we're telling their volunteers to just look at our website. We're going to have the most up-to-date information and work with Project 180. People are coming to downtown. The Thunder games are still selling out. So parking, we're dealing with the same parking that we did last year. It's just navigating downtown is a little bit different. So I think it's just mainly getting the information out there and asking people to log on to our website.
The lot's right across the street on the south side of the event, where Bob Howard used to have the parking, all the cars for sale. That's open all the way from Walker to Robinson, and it is just right across the street. And it's as big as the lot where the Devon building used to be. So, and actually it's just right there. And so that's public parking that will be accessible just right next to the event. It means that the south side of the grounds will be more of an entry than it has been in the past, and we're thrilled about that. We want the entire 360 degrees of the event to be accessible, and it will be.
Mayor, I just might want to point out, I don't believe parking this year will be as much of a challenge as it was last year. We've got some new inventory that's in place, so I think the parking probably is not going to be as much of a challenge as it was last year. Now, the streets are going to be a little bit different than they were last year. Reno will be open back up, so that's a good thing. Robinson will be open back up, but it will only be opened up 2 ways, in 1 lane in each direction. So that won't be full opening. And of course, Sheridan will be shut down. So in and out access is going to be a little bit touchy. We're going to try to get traffic out on Sheridan West, and we're going to try to address that. But that's going to be, I think, a little bit of the more difficult is getting in and out. So a little more patience in that area. But once you get down here, I think the parking will be adequate. And of course, the Myriad Gardens, which was not complete, though a lot of it's going to be open, and it's going to be, I think, a real exciting site. So if you haven't been down, you've got all kinds of reasons to go to the Arts Festival, but another reason is to go down and to see the reopening of the Myriad Gardens. So, but be patient a little bit on in and out access, because we don't have the full amount of street lane capacity that we've had in previous years.
But the Botanical Gardens is the new site this year, and after a year of being shut down, it's going to be a beautiful venue. And it won't be entirely open, but you'll be able to see some wonderful improvements and be able to see with a little bit of vision just what it's going to become in the months and years to come. So this year, attendance at the Arts Festival is mandatory. You must come. This is not the year to take off. Come on downtown. And it starts, give me the dates again, please.
It's April 26th through May 1st.
All right. Thanks, Angela.
Thank you.
You bet. Thanks, Peter. Thank you. How about a motion on item 8H1? Okay. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8H2 is to hold the Cinco de Mayo celebration. Is anyone here wishing to speak on this item and promote the event? If not, I'll entertain a motion. Okay. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously, and the Cinco de Mayo event will be held appropriately on May 5th, 6th, and 7th on 9th Street and Broadway. All right, item 8J, I understand we do not need executive session on this item?
Did I?
I skipped I. Let's back up. Item 8I is our federal grant for public safety, and Phil Sipe is here. Phil, thanks for coming down. Phil represents our firefighters. Phil, we'll need your name and address for the record.
All right, Phil Sipe, 157 Northwest 6th, Oklahoma City. I just wanted to express our gratitude, the firefighters' gratitude, Mayor, members of council, for the acceptance of this grant. It's going to put 29 firefighters back to work that we lost in July of last year. So I wanted to thank you from the bottom of our heart for this. This is going to be great. It's going to be good for the city, good for the citizens. It's going to certainly help the safety of our firefighters. I'd like to basically thank our fire chief, too, and recognize Lance Musgrave, the business manager for the fire department. Lance worked very hard on this proposal. I helped as much as I could. The IAFF did a review of that proposal and made some suggestions and got it back to Lance, and Lance did some more work on it. It was a long process, and we're just very, very thankful that we won the award. Frankly, I think some of us are surprised that we got it, but I want to thank you again generously from the firefighters in the city. This is going to be great for the citizens and good for the firefighters, and I think it's wonderful that you're considering accepting this grant at this time. So thanks again.
All right. Thanks, Phil. All right, we're voting on item 8I. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8J is a resolution that I understand we do not need executive session.
Do not.
All right. Cast your votes on 8J. Passed unanimously. Item 8K, I understand we do not need executive session.
Do not.
All right. Cast your votes. Passed unanimously. Item 8I or 8L, I understand we do not need executive session.
Do not.
Cast your votes, and it passed unanimously. Moves us on to item 9, which is items from council. Pat, you want to get us started?
Nothing, Your Honor. Thank you very much.
Okay. Skip? Meg?
Yes, if I could, just a couple of minutes. Gatewood neighborhood had their annual meeting on Sunday. We had a great turnout, and I really want to thank some of our city staff. Mr. Manager Charles Locke was there from Development Service, and Jim Lynn and Charles Lombardi both attended from Solid Waste, and they did a great job. One of the neighbors is a tour guide, and she's been escorting folks from all around the world around Oklahoma City for the last couple of months, and she said the only negative complaint she's had was from some Canadians, and they were mad that we changed the name of our river. But other than that, everything else was great. And they're just so positive about Oklahoma City. I thought that was fun. I'd also like to recognize the Oklahoma City Ballet. Saturday and Sunday afternoon, they had two fabulous performances of Mozart's Requiem. It was outstanding to a completely sold-out crowd at the Civic Center. It was a collaboration between the Canterbury Choral Society, Oklahoma City Philharmonic, and the ballet, and it was just stunning to see all three of those organizations work together. It was wonderful. And last night was the Main Street banquet for the state of Oklahoma, and we had neighborhoods from all over the state, literally from Woodward to Ardmore to Newkirk. Awards were given out in all the different categories: organization, promotion, economic development, and I want to give a special shout out to Stockyards, who won 2 awards for that fabulous Archway Gateway into Stockyards, and recognize the Plaza District, who was nominated for their Plaza Festival. Thank you.
You bet. Brian? Pete? Larry?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to thank the neighbors in the Meridian Hills, Meridian Manor Neighborhood Association for their hospitality last Thursday. Under President Don Hummer, they had a great program. TLC sent a representative out and gave a very informative talk on spring planning. It fits in with the Oklahoma City Beautiful to make our town more beautiful, and gave some very creative ideas for that. And then Thursday morning at 8:30, our head of Public Works, Dennis Clowers, will be out speaking to the Windsor Area Business Group at 8:30 at Copper Mart Bank to bring the business representatives out, the members of that group, up to speed on what's going on as far as the 23rd Street streetscape. I'd like to encourage all the business owners who are a part of the Windsor Area Business Group and interested citizens to be a part of that meeting. Again, 8:30, Copper Mart Bank, Thursday morning. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, Sam?
Mayor, just a comment on one of the manager's reports. sewer backup claims and damages. You know, just one of these claims that we hear down here is enough for any of us for a year. But I think we can all say that in the last couple of years, there's been less and less of those kinds of just hideous situations where someone's put out their home due to a sewer backup. It just seems to me with this report and how the number of backups has been reduced that we are replacing old pipeline. And I understand through this newer camera inspections that we're doing, we're able to do some preventive maintenance on them and get ahead of this. The policies that we instituted several years ago in that all new residential homes must have sewer backflow valves, as well as anyone that comes in for a permit to repair an existing sewer line has to replace or put on a backflow valve, has just cut down considerably. And to look at these numbers, I'm really amazed to see that in the last 4 years, we're averaging 8 claims a year. I think it says a whole lot as to the priority that the water department has put on the sewer backups, and obviously we're not getting the kind of hideous complaints that we had been getting. So thank you, City Manager.
Yeah, I want to jump in, Sam. Just let's go ahead and give the numbers. In 1983, according to the City Manager's report, we paid 172 claims a year. And then by 1995, it had been reduced to 29, and as you appropriately mentioned, 8 a year at this point. And in a city our size, that is tremendous progress. And as you mentioned, all 8 of those are regrettable. But that's good improvement for a city our size. And I know the city staff has worked diligently following council direction to get that number as small as possible. And I think it's a success story to the extent that we can call it that for bringing that forward.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Was the law at any time during that time frame we just mentioned, was the law in regard to our liability changed significantly?
No, sir.
It's always been the same?
Yes, sir.
So that improvement is directly related to the city?
Yeah, and it's a number of things. It's a capital improvement process that we've implemented. It's the implementation of the backflow preventers, as Mr. Bowman pointed out. We have a sewer cleanup crew that comes out to help, and that's minimized some of the claims that have come down the line. Better public education. It's a number of things that have taken place.
Can I comment on that? I couldn't be more pleased with this report either than as is Sam. I know from personal experience this has been a council priority since the 80s. I mean, this was something that Councilman Jerry Gilbert was very concerned about back in the 80s. I mean, he was on this. We reorganized the system back in the 80s, and that's really when all this started. And the continued emphasis over that period of time, 25, 30 years now, has made a huge difference in it. And I'm not so sure when you look at the number of claims we have now that we can expect to decrease them much lower than they are now. What we discovered, I think, back then was that the system had aged to a point where we had reached kind of a high point. And as the system, and we didn't do something. With the system continuing to age, we had to do something. And this has been a long-term process. You just look at the reduction between 83 and 95, and you can see that was a huge drop from 172 to 29. But it's something that the line maintenance people, all the people in that part of Oklahoma City, staff are to be commended for, because it's a constant battle to try to keep this right. I can't think of a more horrendous thing in your life to have your home just completely devastated with one of these giant backups than we see. And we used to see them virtually on every council meeting.
Well, I grew up in a house where we had sewer backups in northwest Oklahoma City. About once every 4 or 5 or 6 months, my parents would have to deal with it as a small child, and it doesn't happen anymore. Gary?
Just a couple of things. One, congratulations to the Thunder for making the playoffs, second year in a row, and it's certainly in only the third year they're here, so congratulations to them. Apologize to Pat, I didn't get a chance to talk to him this morning because it's in his ward, but you saw the news recently with the significant crash of the gasoline tanker at Sarah Road and Northwest Highway. It's my understanding, I've been told, and I'd like to get verification, Jim, that traffic has looked at that intersection and it does qualify. It's already been approved for a traffic signal. Now we're waiting on funding. That's the second crash there in a short period of time. I'd like to see if that is in fact true, that it's been approved through traffic already, and get some idea of when we could try to identify some funding for that light.
I don't know the answer to that, but I'll get back to you on that.
You want to introduce Mike Mize?
I do want to introduce Mike Mize. This is just another step in the MAPS process. There's a lot of steps in the MAPS process. We have plenty of process with MAPS amongst our subcommittees and all our members, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing to have that many people involved and passionate about what's going on. Eric has given you some updates in the past. Mike was here several weeks ago to give you another update, and this is more of a refined update talking about our implementation plan and beginning to talk about scheduling what projects when. Mike made this presentation to most of the subcommittees, within all the subcommittees last week, as well as the advisory board. And we're here to present this to you, to get a little feedback. And then we will be having a workshop on April 19th with this council and the advisory board to further flesh out these issues. So we're trying to make sure that the council's input is, that you hear the progress and the plans, and that you are heard and that part of the process as we go forward. And before I turn it over to Mike, Mr. McAtee has been the council representative to the board, and I know a number of you have been to some subcommittee meetings, but Mr. McAtee, is there anything you want to add to the process, or as we set up Mr. Mize?
Well, from an overview, the process has been very open, very positive, very inclusive. Each subcommittee has done due diligence in their areas to move their particular decisions along. And I think you'll see as we go forward in this that a lot of work has been done, a lot of progress has been made, and yet we're still just at the beginning stages. I think the encouragement is that the citizens will get what they voted for back when the election was held, and things are moving in a very positive direction. So I think you'll be encouraged by what you hear today.
Mayor, council members, Mr. Couch, thank you for this opportunity. Before I start, I'd like to introduce two of my colleagues who are here today, Nicole Franklin, who many of you may have seen at subcommittee meetings and has been involved in civic activities for a long time, and Tom Wilson as well, who I think most of you probably know. As Mr. Couch indicated, the primary reason for us to be here today is to provide a preliminary program order. This will be the first step in completing the implementation plan. The implementation plan will be the document that moves us forward and provides the process, a formalized process for how MAPS 3 moves forward in the future. Just a brief bit of history. I'm sure most of you know this. For others in the audience who may not be quite as familiar, MAPS started in 1993. This is the current iteration of MAPS. We've been collecting tax revenues since April of 2010 in an effort to achieve the total of $777 million. One of the questions that I get frequently in these presentations is, how much have we collected? We've collected approximately $70 million, which is very much on track with the projections that we were provided by city staff. So that's really very good news right now.
Well, Mike, a year's collection is going to be more than $70 million. Are you saying that's the money?
I'm saying that's what's been collected in 10 months.
Okay. I just want to make that clear.
That's right.
The penny is collected, it'll be north of $90 million somewhere.
I can't remember what the exact projection is, but I do know that we're very much on track with the projections that have been provided by Kathy O'Connor and her staff.
Okay.
One of the things that I'd like to reiterate and point out, I'll point out several times during this presentation, As Councilman McAtee noted, this is the very beginning of the process. We have begun to collect data. There is a significant amount of data that needs yet to be collected. This is our first attempt, given the data that we have, to provide a possible order for the individual MAPS 3 projects. This is subject to change based on additional information that comes in, and we will continue to update and monitor the situation both before we complete the implementation plan and afterward. This is a listing of the published budgets for each of the individual projects. I don't think I need to read through each one of those. I'll talk about each of the projects individually in just a moment. The one thing I would like to note on this slide is at the very bottom, we do have a $17 million program contingency. MAPS projects in the past have tried to maintain a program contingency, which is there to help in the event that a particular project comes in unexpectedly high at actual bid time, to help with unexpected spikes in inflation and other issues which we may or may not be able to predict. So our goal is to try to maintain that $17 million overall program contingency throughout the life of the program to help even things out and provide a cushion in the case that we need it in the future. With respect to each of the individual projects, the numbers that we just reviewed are not construction numbers. Those are overall project budgets. Each of those individual projects contains a number of different components, and some of those are listed on the slide that you see in front of you. I'd just like to emphasize some of those. Any consulting that takes place, any architecture and engineering fees come out of that program budget. Other pre-construction costs, such as environmental studies or any required environmental remediation that may be required. And the park site's an example of a site where environmental studies will certainly be required, and there may be remediation that's required as well. And any such activities will come out of the individual project budget. Geotechnical and other construction-related testing, land acquisition, if it's applicable to the individual project, will come out of that budget. Obviously, construction. And then we also have a built-in project contingency that can help with the normal course of change orders in a project, can also be used to help with potential changes in scope, or with inflation that can't be predicted as well.
So, Mike, could I just clarify that each individual project has its own contingency fund over and above that $17 million that's the total project contingency?
That's correct.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, they have all been budgeted with an individual project contingency, correct.
Very consistent to how we did MAPS for Kids. MAPS for Kids had the same thing. We had individual project contingencies, and we had an overall program contingency.
Other budget considerations. In order to establish a baseline for project budgets, we've taken the same course that some other MAPS projects have. Budgets are considered to be program midpoint budgets. And the program midpoint, which we've selected, is January 1st of 2016. That means that if the budget for an individual project is $130 million, it's $130 million as of that date. In an attempt to try to account for the fact that early projects won't suffer as much from inflation as later projects, early projects will probably see some reduction in their actual published budgets. Later projects will receive higher budget numbers to reflect the increased cost of inflation. The best example I can give you of that is wellness centers. We know that the wellness centers are unlikely to all be the same, but for purposes of this example, if we knew that we were going to have two wellness centers that were virtually identical, one that came early in the project and one that came late, in order to achieve the same scope of services and programming in those two projects. The earlier project, because it would not be as subject to as much inflation, would have a lower budget than a project that came, for example, in 2017 or 2018. So we've tried to achieve parity among the MAPS 3 projects and within the individual phases or projects for each of the projects as well.
I got a question on this, Mike.
Yes, sir.
I know this was a discussion point in a number of the committees, certainly the ones that I sit in on. And while I started out thinking I understood it, I think I got confused by the end. Let's take, for example, a single project, and I'm just going to pick the convention center as something that is a single entity project. If the convention center started out at 280 in discussions way back when, are you saying that if it's later in the project, it'll still be 280, but it's going to buy less in the project? 280 will give them less convention center because of inflation? Or are you actually saying the convention center may be 265 budgeted?
If it comes after January 1st of 2016, that budget may actually be increased, so that it, instead of the 280 or it may actually be 290, 295, depending on what our projected inflation rate is at the time.
Okay, and that money that allows you to increase that comes from the fact that you save money in early projects?
Save money.
Moving money between projects?
Yes. We would actually be moving money between projects. Projects that come earlier in the program might have their budgets reduced. A $60 million project that comes early may be a $55 or a $57 million project. But if you go to the January 1st, 2016 date, they will all have had the exact same published budget that we've seen to date.
So the early projects that might get reduced, are you actually going to reduce the numbers when you go out for bid of what you're saying that project is going to be, or are you hoping they come in under whatever their amount originally was, and that's the savings you'll get?
Well, it would be both, but we will actually have a lower targeted budget.
Very similar to what we did on Maps for Kids. We had a square foot price throughout whether, for an example, in elementary school, we had a square foot price that we used in 2003 or 4, and then we had a price that we used in 2007, and then we used a price in 2011, and that went up over time. So you had more money into a later project, although you were getting exactly the same improvements and less money in the earlier project.
Well, I understand just a second. I understand the concept that you're using, but I'm a little concerned that the entities involved in these projects, whether it be the River Trust or the Fair Board or the COTPA or whoever it may be, they had an expectation of a dollar amount based on all of the things we put out for the MAPS 3 vote, and now all of a sudden, if they're early on, they're going to have less money, and if they're later on, they might have more money. Yeah. And I'm wondering how that's working in the whole concept. I understand what we're trying to do and adjust for that.
Mike? I would suspect they'd rather go earlier than later, despite the slight adjustment of dollars. But are you getting any feedback from the stakeholders?
We have. All of the subcommittees have indicated that they would like to go first.
They want, so it doesn't seem to be dampering their enthusiasm for the timeline.
Well, and I think that's okay if the understanding is if a project was scheduled at $60 million and they're one of the first ones and we adjust that budget down to 55, are we expecting that 55 is going to get them the same amount of project that they thought they were going to get for 60 in all of the literature?
I think the answer to that is yes. They would get them the same amount that they would have available to them on January 1st of 2016. Does that help?
A little.
I'm sorry.
No, I think I understand it, but I know that there was a number of committee members that seemed to be a little confused in how that worked. Were you actually talking about actually reducing their dollars, or were you talking about you thought inflation was going to affect what they were going to get for their money? And I think that's some of the confusion that's going on.
I think it's both.
To me, it seems that Gary's question is not really a math question, it's more of a PR question. Is that the feel that I'm getting, Gary? You're asking how's, instead of it being a math question about the dollars, it's more of a PR question. How do we explain that we said 60 and it's 55, or we said 120, it's going to be 140?
That's what the people are picking up on, is that the dollar amount they thought they were getting for their project is now looks like it may be, if they're right on 2016, it'll be that much, but it could be less, it could be more, depending on it. And does that mean they're going to get less project, or does that simply mean inflation is going to give them more or less in the system?
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on the timeline? Yeah, Sam?
Could you, Mike, just reduce this maybe as simply as possible? Take sidewalks. Small cost, visible project, $10 million. It's early on the schedule at this time. What's going to be the message? Use sidewalks. What's the message going to be?
What we're trying to do is provide some parity so that the projects which come later in the program aren't disadvantaged by an increase in inflation. What we're going to, sidewalks, just take sidewalks as an example. We've suggested at this point that the sidewalk project be broken into 4 separate phases. We'd like for each of those 4 phases to have the same effective buying power, regardless of where they come during the actual the program. And in order to do that, we'll reduce the amount of budget for the first phase, and it may buy 15 miles of sidewalk. In order to get 15 miles of sidewalk later on in the program, we're going to have to increase the actual budget for that particular phase, because inflation will have affected the cost per mile of sidewalk. So this is an attempt to find a way to provide parity as we go forward in the project and not disadvantage future projects.
So if people understood the first run out was however many miles, 15 miles, you could pretty well expect that. And if it's going to be 4-phase, 15.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay. I have a question on the 2-year gap on the convention center. Can you go over and I'm guessing it's a combination of staff time and accumulating the dollars. Is that right, or am I missing a point?
That's absolutely correct. I mean, if the construction cost of the convention center could be in the range of $200 million. At the projected rate of tax revenue collection, that's a 2-year time frame simply to collect the amount of money that's needed. Since this is a pay-as-you-go program, all of the dollars for any individual phase of any project need to be collected and effectively in the bank before that phase can go out to bid. So you're absolutely correct. It takes 2 years just to raise the amount of money that's required for the convention.
Okay. I guess what I didn't want to get into is, if it were an issue of staffing, I think we ought to staff up. But if it's an issue of collecting the money, then we got to collect the money. I mean, that makes sense to me.
We do have to collect the money. The other thing that we've tried to do, and remember, this is a first attempt, we've tried to provide we've provided dollar contingency in this project. We've also tried to provide some schedule contingency in case there are unforeseen circumstances, projects run later than they should, and other events that we can't control. So there is a little bit of time contingency involved in that as well, but the single biggest reason, Mayor, is the fact that it does take 2 years to collect that money.
Okay. And I'll just say one other outcome on the timeline. This is a year ahead of where I had projected that we would finish, based on the previous 2 MAPS initiatives. This is a full year ahead of where I suspected that the projects would end. So if we can get it done in that time frame, great. I'm all for as early as possible. This is pretty aggressive.
We believe it's fairly aggressive. We also understand that if things go very well and go better than expected, that because we have built some schedule contingency in, there may be some opportunity to move some things forward as well.
There's obviously a lot of unforeseen things we can't predict today. And
Absolutely.
I know you got a lot more to go, so why don't you continue, and council, feel free to interject as it seems appropriate, but let's try and make the questions pertain to what he's talking about at that particular time, as opposed to waiting till the end and then trying to pick up all the pieces. So Mike, why don't you go ahead?
The order that we gave you of the individual project budgets and the order that you'll see them now is, it's not random. It's based on largest dollar amount to smallest. So that's how we chose to present these. Convention Center, just as an update, the goal is for 200,000 square feet of actual exhibit space, 50,000 square feet of meeting, and 35,000 square feet of ballroom. The actual size and scope of that project will be determined by the dollars that are available at that time. We will design to budget to provide a facility that meets the needs of the convention center and the expectations of the voters. The published budget is $280 million. That includes a $30 million projected cost to relocate an electrical substation. Timing, we just talked a little bit about the timing. The convention center is, in this iteration, scheduled to be the last project to start, and because it is the largest project and it will require the longest period of time to actually raise the tax revenues. The downtown park, you've seen initial plans and initial scope for the park that included amenities such as a cafe, a lake, and other kinds of amenities. Once again, the amenities in that park and the scope of that project will be driven by the actual construction dollars available. The published budget of $130 million is both for the upper 40-acre park and the lower 30-acre park. We really believe that the available construction dollars may constrain the scope of work that was provided in the original Hargraves study, but we believe that there is sufficient money to be able to provide a park that will be more than usable by the citizens. Timing, the upper park timing is scheduled to coincide with the anticipated completion of the boulevard in 2014. The lower park will be much farther on in the program because land acquisition for that 30 acres of lower park won't actually begin until 2014. So the construction will be sometime after that. Remember, there's land acquisition cost as part of this process as well that will take some of that $130 million. Modern streetcar and transit hub, the scope is a published possible of 5 to 6 miles of track and a multimodal transit hub. The number of miles of track, again, will be determined by the actual construction dollars available. It also requires a maintenance facility. That 5 to 6 miles of track also needs to include track to get to the hub and to the maintenance facility. The published budget is $130 million. We have engaged a number of consultants already. Our consultant for the modern streetcar has indicated that the 5 to 6 miles of track is a reasonable number based on costs today. And while I'm talking about that, construction costs right now are incredibly difficult to predict. They are going up, particularly for the basic kinds of materials which will affect a number of these parks. The price of steel has continued to go up even during the economic downturn. Anything petroleum-based right now is going up in price pretty dramatically. We've actually seen some asphalt prices that have gone up almost 20% in the last 3 months. Other petroleum-based products that you might not just immediately think of, carpet has gone up dramatically in the last 6 to 12 months because it's a petroleum-based product.
Let me speak a little bit to this part of the initiative. We suspect that our MAPS transit dollars are going to be able to be multiplied somewhat by a federal government help. We don't know that. We have made sure that we can commit to the voters what we've done with our money only. But you'll recall that the council also added into the definition on the resolution for MAPS 3 that we would like to try and be involved in some rail projects that might connect Tinker Air Force Base or might be as part of the excursion line out to the Adventure District. And so those options are available according to the resolution, but they are going to be reliant on federal dollars coming in to help, continue our rail initiative. And so I think it's clear that we get that on record, that it's not listed here, but it's still part of the list of what we would like to have accomplished if we can get the federal dollars down the line. Yeah, you opened your mouth.
I would think there's probably also a lot of additional federal dollars for just the system itself. There are not very many cities that have the money to come up with a match. They don't have $130 million in cash. I was told this week that, or last week, that there was money returned from federal transit grant money was returned last year because cities couldn't meet the match. If that's the case, we could expand what, as I've indicated before, the 5 or 6 miles is something that really sticks in my craw as being way too small to matter. But if, in fact, we could access federal transit grant money, I mean, that could make that system a whole different system. It could actually, as I've said before, actually pick up somebody and take them to work that actually is going to pay for it.
I think we've been conservative, and that was the goal. I don't know of a transit system that has met its budget anywhere in the United States. I think every single one of them, though, has exceeded their budgets. And so I guess a reminder, we want to be the first to keep our rail-based project on budget, but we would love to have some federal dollars down the line, and I know we're going to be continuing to pursue that.
Are we applying? I mean, that may not be your part of this, but do you know that we're applying for those federal grant monies as we go forward? Are we doing that?
We have not, because we don't have anything to apply for at this point in time, but we will. That's why we're going through the alternative analysis, to make sure that we have done the proper things that will allow us to be eligible for federal grants as they become available.
Well, I would think whatever it took to move that system forward to get us to the point where we can apply. I mean, the grant money that's returned is not going to be there forever with the economic system problem we have now at the federal level. I mean, it's
we
likely
have
that
applied
if we
for
don't,
the Tiger grants.
Yeah, if we don't claim it, if it's there, if we're not in a position to claim it, it's going to be lost.
And that's what the alternative analysis process is for.
Is there some way to speed that up to the point where, I mean, we're talking a substantial amount of money. We're talking about perhaps as much money from grants as we've allocated through the tax.
Well, I believe, I mean, for one thing, both the mayor and Mr. Couch are correct. The alternatives analysis is a requirement. Having that completed is a requirement to go after federal funds. But
Let's
as far as
Rick Kane on up and get that answer.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know Rick was here.
He just walked in. Rick, where are we on our aggressiveness in applying for federal grants?
Well, interestingly enough, tomorrow I'll be down in Fort Worth meeting with the regional office and also via teleconference with those in Washington who are assisting us in the development of the AA. And we have presented the first series of reports to them that outline the overall project. Much of what we were doing was also dependent upon a new transportation model that was being developed by ACOG, and that has been completed. So we're now developing the ridership numbers that we have that to work with. So we're moving fairly quickly. We would anticipate, completion of the AA sometime late summer. And part of our discussion tomorrow will be to try to get a commitment as much as you can from the FTA as to how quickly ultimately we think they would approve our final submission. So that gives us a better timetable. Now, we have already requested and received additional funding through a Tiger II grant for the environmental analysis, which is the next step in the process. And so we're already setting those monies aside. And in fact, our board has authorized an RFP to be issued to get a consultant under contract that would help work on that next step of the process. So we're moving along about as quickly as we can. Overall, our delay has really been a function of waiting for the transportation model to be developed. That is a requirement of the FTA, and that was something that we had to work in harmony with ACOG to do.
Okay. Rick, what's the amount that we received from the Tiger II grant?
It was just under $380,000.
And that's just for the environmental study?
That's part of the cost, yes. Now, we have to match that with local share, and as we go through the AA process, the feds will also give us some advice. That has been somewhat of a moving target because as more of these projects have developed, they've started to request for more detailed engineering information. You know, several years ago, that would not have been part of the process, or the degree of, let's say, analysis wouldn't have been as much as they're requiring right now. So there are some changing rules as we go through this process, as we see more and more demand for less and less money. And that's really the challenge, particularly those of you who follow closely, and I know from a council perspective you do. You know, a lot of discussion in Washington right now about deficit reduction, and so the amount of money that's being made available for transit projects has far more demand than what's in the bank, what's in the checking account right now. So it is a competitive process, no question about it. And one of the things that we felt strongly about is the fact that because we already, the voters of Oklahoma City have already passed the money, and we can demonstrate clearly that we have local share funding, we think that helps us in the process. But I don't want to downplay it. It's still going to be very difficult as we go through this entire process, and that's why, again, we're trying to work very closely with the FTA to make sure that we stay on target so we don't lose any time in terms of going through the steps that we have to.
Okay.
Just on the question of timing, Rick, you said this summer we're likely to have the AA report completed.
Yes.
Is there anything with transit money available, providing it's available, and Oklahoma City perhaps having a little step ahead with some match money to bring to the table, would we be precluded prior to the summer to making application with the Fed's understanding that we're 3-4 months away from that final analysis, because the application timing is going to be consumed in that?
Well, it really depends. You might recall we went through a Tiger I process, and we did make application for those additional monies, which we would have used for more analysis. And one of the requirements of that was that you had to have a completed AA. Now, we went ahead and submitted because we didn't, even though we didn't have a completed AA, we weren't sure how many people were going to apply for the money. What turned out is that there were far more applications for the money than there was money available, and so when they went through their cut criteria, initially they said, if you don't have an AA completed, you're not even going to be considered to go any further. So, I mean, in part, it's a function of what are the rules that they set for the money that they make available. And I think generally what you can anticipate is there's going to be far more demand for the money than there is money to be paid out. And so even though we would have liked to have moved forward, it was outside of our control because we hadn't completed the AA, and that's why that's so critical.
But the timing now, Rick, in that we have the match that we didn't have when we made that application.
That doesn't really help us because, again, the criteria was you had to have a completed AA, regardless of how much local share money you have.
One of the things that the mayor said, though, earlier when he asked about the convention center was, would staff help? Would additional staff make a difference? I mean, this is a lot of money to not be able to go for if just a little additional staff help could, or some additional staff help could move this deadline from late summer to early summer, or move it from, I guess that's the difference between September and July.
Yeah, our process right now from the standpoint of staffing is really, the simple answer is no. The consultant is going through their process, and it just takes time to do some of that. But really the timing, and now that we're in at the depth that we are in the AA process, is more a function of the FTA responding back to us, and that's something that's outside of our control. So we have tried to take what we think is a reasonable but yet conservative timetable for those approvals, and that's part of the discussion tomorrow is to confirm, do they believe that the timeframes that we built into this are reasonable and that they can respond that quickly. So I don't know that if we threw any more people at it, it would really expedite it anymore. It's really going to be a question more from the standpoint of not only the regional office approval, but Washington and how quickly they respond to our submissions.
So it's my understanding, Rick, that September 30th is that critical drop-dead date for 2011 funding.
Well, that's interesting. That would be the end of the that's the end of the federal fiscal year. However, as you're well aware, right now we're operating under continuing resolution. So the money that we would have typically known how much we were going to have to spend in this federal fiscal year, we still don't know, because what they have been doing is just rationing that out. As we get a continuing resolution, they authorize a certain amount of money to come in our direction. Now, because of that type of a history that we've had, this happens almost regularly, unfortunately. We have taken a very conservative approach in how we do our budgeting and what we do with federal money allocations. And so even though the federal money theoretically, had it come on time, would have come out last October 1st and we would have known what we would have had to spend, we actually don't budget that until next year's fiscal year. So at this point in time, we have made an assumption as to how much money we're going to receive from the feds in their current fiscal year as we prepared next year's budget that we'll be presenting to you shortly. But yet we still don't have an absolute confirmation as to what that number is going to be. The bigger issue, I think, in our case is really going to be what's going to be appropriated in the new transit allocation, the new transportation bill, which Congress has yet to really take up. They've been more focused on funding for this current fiscal year, the federal fiscal year, and that's what's really important to us, is that we identify our project and try to get it inserted in the new transportation bill. We're working with our federal delegation to try to make that happen. That doesn't guarantee funding, but what it does do is add some credibility or validity to our project. And so our delegation is well aware of what we're trying to do here in Oklahoma City, and they're supportive of it, but it's going to have to be part of the new crafted transportation bill.
All right, ready to move on? All right, Rick, thanks.
With respect to the timing, we've tried to define an early phase which would complete a proposed 4-mile loop that would provide some service to the citizens of Oklahoma City early on. The balance of the work would be done later in the program. We've also tried to identify some early procurement phases for cars and for rails, because we know that those are very long lead items. Cars can take 2 to 2.5 years. Rail typically has been a 9-month lead time item, so we're trying to deal with that as part of the program order. The Oklahoma River, there are a number of proposed projects that really follow the recommendations of the Oklahoma City Boathouse Foundation that include a whitewater park, a grandstand lighting, and some other amenities for the river. Once again, the actual scope and number of projects is going to be determined by the available dollars at that particular time. The published budget is $60 million. Cost estimates which have been provided to us are fairly rough. The scope of those projects has not been thoroughly defined, but I can tell you that we've met with Mike Knopp on several occasions to try to refine those numbers and get a little bit better idea of scope for moving forward. 2 projects are currently underway with respect to the river. One is the racecourse lighting, and the other is, it actually hasn't started yet, but there's negotiation going on right now for a study for the windscreens that would cover the first 1,000 meters the final 1,000 meters of the race course. I just looked at Councilman McAtee. The last time I did this, I said 1,000 miles, and he was kind enough to correct me. State Fairgrounds proposed 300,000 square feet of exhibit space with some additional parking. Once again, budget will, actual dollars available will drive the actual size of the facility. A current published budget of $60 million. It may require that, based on current costs, that the facility be a little smaller than originally anticipated, but we've actually met with Tim O'Toole to talk about that, and we think we've got some resolutions to some of those issues. The construction schedule in some ways is a little complicated because there's a 3 to 4 month period from September through December where it's very difficult to have construction ongoing because of the state fair and a couple of other events. So our placement in the program order takes some of that into consideration for the fairgrounds as well. The health and wellness centers, in some ways this is the least defined of the scope. There is a contract out right now for a consultant, which is AIP, a local architectural firm, in conjunction with KMD, a national firm with significant experience in wellness centers, to try and develop project scope for the wellness centers. The published information said 4 to 5 centers. We've engaged our own consultant. We really believe that the number is going to be 4, and we believe that the dollars available are adequate for 4 centers. Published budget of $50 million. We understand that City Council would like to see some of these moved as close to the front of the program as possible, and we've tried to do that with the first one and follow that as logically as we can with other centers.
Mike?
Yes, sir.
It looks, I mean, in an organized way, the phasing of the 4 centers looks like a nice way to organize it. I would hope from a public relations standpoint, keep open to the idea that it might make more sense at this cost to go north-south at the same time, for instance. One north, one south, be on the same schedule.
And we obviously would take that into consideration, but I think the single biggest factor in when a wellness center is going to be able to start is going to be the attraction of a partner to operate and manage the center. And I think without that partner, it's going to be difficult to start the process. I know that the city would like to put out an RFP and to define some of the actual interest from partners fairly soon this year. And that is going to provide an awful lot of further information about what level of interest is out there and potential geographic areas where those centers may occur. But it would be nice to be able to do more than one at a time, but really the identification and
Mike, I think that's exactly the way it ought to be going. If the partners aren't there at the timing, you certainly don't want to push it.
Right.
But I'm just happy to hear you're open to that idea, and as RFP goes out, we'll see if there's a north and south interest at the same time.
And there may be.
Good.
So, no, we are open to, I mean, as I've said, this is a dynamic document that we've given you. There will be lots of considerations going forward.
Mike?
Yes, sir.
At the present time, what is some of the discussions in reference to what the wellness centers will include? I mean, have there been some discussions in reference to what the actual amenities and the components of the wellness center is? Because I think some people have gotten lost with some of the promotion from the beginning as it being aquatic centers, and I think it is either distance some individuals or some entities as it relates to partnerships with this. So have they discussed some of the actual components of the wellness center?
The subcommittee has discussed those in some very general terms. I think the important thing to note is that the city's engaged a consultant to actually help further define what are the potential components that would go into any given wellness center. Noting that the subcommittee and that consultant also understand that if we have 4 centers, they may be 4 different centers with 4 different programs and 4 different scopes, depending on the specific needs of a certain geographic area. So it's the job of this consultant, which again I said is AIP, a local architectural firm, and KMD out of San Francisco, to help define what that laundry list of components is so that it can then be incorporated into each of the wellness centers as it's appropriate, depending on who the operating partner is and where in the city that center is located. So that conversation is ongoing, and that definition will be provided fairly shortly.
I would hope that the process is open enough so that the potential partner will be in a position to help define what goes at a particular location. I mean, I've thought and talked to several people that are interested, and many of them have very different ideas about what they could bring to the table based on the real interest of the possible partner. I mean, you can think of different entities that might be willing to step up and be that operation maintenance partner. They're going to want to create this center around what their interests are now. They're going to try. I can see them being remarkably different in terms of the general thrust of the wellness center. And I hope that the RFP or the process is going to be open enough to let separate proposers do just that.
And I believe that the subcommittee has that feeling right now, that they're willing to be open, but I think they also understand that while the partner is important, it's also important for the city to have some kinds of minimum standards and goals with respect to these. So there's going to be a balance between what the subcommittee and its consultant recommend and what an individual partner wants to try to achieve as well. Ready to move on? Mm-hmm. Trails. We have actually followed the Trails Master Plan to a large extent with this early analysis. There was a published amount of approximately 50 miles of trail. Once again, I mentioned the cost of asphalt's gone up significantly. We'll have to see what available construction dollars we have at any given time to determine the actual miles of trails that are constructed. It's a published budget of $40 million. We've done it we've shown 4 phases based on the last subcommittee meeting. That may turn into 3. We'll work with them to determine whether it's actually 3 or 4 phases of trails. Once again, City Council requested that this go early in the project, and we've tried to reflect that in the program order which you've received. Sidewalks, in some ways similar to trails, an anticipated 70 miles of trail, which will once again be determined by the actual construction dollars available. There's a $10 million budget, and these projects have also been put fairly close to the front of the program to reflect some comments by City Council.
By the way, I don't remember it being 70. Is that right? Were we publicizing 70 miles, Sam, with the sidewalk strategic plan?
We published 10 million. At that time, we could do 70 miles.
Okay.
So 70 miles was mentioned.
As an estimate of what we'd be able to do. Restricted more by dollars than by the plan. Okay.
And once again, we will be designing and achieving scope based on budget available.
Right. Okay.
Okay. We've talked a little bit about this. Some of the things that are going to affect, that could possibly impact the program order that you have in front of you. are things like fluctuations in sales tax, changes in project scope, some of these other items, so that you know we will continue to work with city staff throughout the 10-year program to analyze the status of current tax revenue collections, construction inflation, and other factors which are going to impact, which may impact this program order. And we'll do that on a frequent and ongoing basis and report to City Council how those things may impact the project order in the future. You have a copy of the program order in front of you. Are there any other specific questions about the program order?
Well, I would just throw this out for council discussion. How do you judge the economic development impact of some of these projects as far as, you know, our timeline? In other words, it's being suggested and will continue to be suggested that if the convention center is going to produce X amount of dollars into the economy, that it should have a more accelerated timeline. And I guess as part of the answer, I'll throw out, you know, some of these others, well, all of them actually, have economic development impact, but it's more difficult to quantify than it is for the convention center. There's no question that sidewalks add to the quality of life, which adds to the economic development, but it's hard to quantify exactly what that is. It's a little more easier because you have metrics with the convention center to come up with a dollar figure. Any comments or questions from the council on the economic development impact and the order of the suggestions?
Well, the only comment I would have, I'm surprised to see that our first sidewalk project isn't scheduled to be completed in 2013. And it seems like that's a long time to put that off. That's a visible project. It's something that would impact the public immediately. It would give some, I think, value to the public's perception of the MAPS program. But the earliest project we're completing right now is a river project that probably has a relatively small exposure to the public as a whole in the city. It's important. I'm not trying to suggest that it's not an important project, but in terms of the public's perception of what we're doing, it seems like some of the projects that would have the greatest impact on the public got to be put up.
So you'd like to see a sidewalk project moved up earlier to have some early
Well,
impact?
I think 2013 is a long time to wait.
I understand. Okay.
If we do that, Pat, I thought at one time, it looks like everything is being phased, Mike. I thought at one time we were just going to do sidewalks as a project, so that visible impact would be seen at the front end, not phased over the 4 years.
Well, but we're going to be doing so many sidewalks with the bond issue. You know, there's going to be sidewalks nonstop, and I don't know that the general public's going to differentiate between what's funded out of MAPS 3 and what was out of the 07 bond issue.
Well, the 07, though, Mayor, is within not arterial streets. It's within neighborhoods.
That's true.
This is a very visible impact that everybody's going to see. And again, this phasing looks good organizationally, Mike, but if we're going to do this, I mean, you either have the contractors available to do it, and you do it at the same time.
Surprisingly, it's fairly difficult to find contractors to do. It would be very difficult to find a contractor who could do 70 miles of sidewalk as part of one contract. It would be difficult to find somebody who could do all of the trails as part of one contract. From my understanding, there are a limited number of contractors who actually have that capability if it were in a single contract. One of the reasons to try and break this down is to provide a little bit more potential competition with respect to some of the
But I just ask the manager, do we have the contractors? Not a contractor to do 70 miles, but do we have the contractors?
Well, I assume so. There's, there's obviously capacity out there.
But one of the reasons we're here, Councilman, is to get comments and suggestions from City Council so that we can make some attempts to incorporate those going forward. As Mr. Couch mentioned, on April 19th, there's a joint meeting of City Council and the Citizens Advisory Board. At that time, we plan to provide a couple of other possible program order documents for you to review so that we can, you will have an opportunity to see what kind of an impact that might have on the overall program if we were to consolidate some of those projects. One of the other things I'd like to go back to is, the Mayor mentioned economic development impact. We've engaged a national consultant who's in the process of providing some initial information on economic development impact. That data will be available for the April 19th meeting for Council and the Advisory Board to consider as part of that workshop on the 19th as well.
All of this is I don't know that I disagree with anything that's been said as far as the starts and all of that, but I would suspect if this was an interactive screen and you moved all the sidewalks up to the beginning, you'd see other things move out on the other end. I mean, it's all going to move around based on the available dollars. So if you want to talk about doing trails or sidewalks or wellness centers, whatever it may be, and you start sliding them earlier in the program, if it was interactive, what you'd see is other things are going to slide out the other end too. So I think we need to really stay up on the bigger level and identify how all of this interacts together.
That's a really good point, and the fact of the matter is what you're seeing is a fairly simple graphic representation of a fairly sophisticated analysis that goes on in the background that takes into account the actual month-to-month projected revenues that we've been provided by the city. And as we move phases of a project or entire projects on this program order, it does have a significant impact on other phases and other projects.
Yeah. Totally agree with Mike on that, that it is a dynamic process. You move something up, something has to go back. That being said, the sidewalks is a small enough project that it could be done without having a significant impact on it. And if that's a policy decision of council, that they would like to see the sidewalks done earlier, that's the kind of input we're looking for either today or in the workshop next week. That's what we're here to find out, those type of issues or those type of direction from council.
And maybe it's not bad if we move these things around. Maybe that's what we're here for.
I think we're looking for that.
To establish some priorities that may not be exactly the priorities we're being presented with this morning.
Yeah, we're looking for input from our stakeholders, from the council, and hopefully we're going to draw up with a consensus through the workshop in a couple of weeks and in a document that we'll bring back to you that we can all say this is a good plan for us to adopt in 2011. Now, parts of that may change in 2014 or 2018 as factors change on down the line, but we're just like we did on Maps for Kids. We've had a program implementation plan that we've modified 2 or 3 times as we've gone through the years. I anticipate that will happen here, but we'll have at least a game plan that we all agree upon that this is the direction we're going at this point. And that's what we're trying to get. And we're trying to get your input either today, we're trying to get input from our advisory board members as we meet with them, and more with the workshop in a couple of weeks.
I do think one of the other really important things, Mike, that you said very early on is to remember that these budgets aren't just construction budgets. And we're spending an awful lot of dollars on every one of these projects moving forward with consultants and with pre-engineering and with land acquisition costs. So the fact that we're dollar-driven by sales tax collections and that there's so much that has to occur before we're ready to turn a spade impacts this significantly.
In some cases, it'll take more than a year to do design for a particular project. That's absolutely correct.
And in some areas, there's progress right now. The post office, if you've been by it, is over halfway down at this point in time. So there is progress. We've purchased land for the park. We have made progress, and slow progress in some certain areas.
Mike, just a comment. I would like to see you take a look at moving the sidewalks into a more accelerated schedule, because I think that can be done without any impact on some of the other projects, and that's just the input from Ward 3.
Ward 8 would second that kind of thing.
When we talk about economic impact, I'm not sure that, obviously economic development impact is important, but economic development was not it may have been what financed the Maps 3 election, but it wasn't what got people to vote for it. People voted for it because it had things that mattered to them. I figured, in my mind, Maps 3 was maps for the people that were going to pay for it. it was trails, it was sidewalks, it was wellness centers, it was people. It wasn't for people that might come here, it was people that were already here. And my priority is to keep those projects for us that are here and that are going to pay for it on the front end. That's the wellness centers, the sidewalks, the trails. Those are the three items in my mind that ought to stay to the front, because I think we need to show the people that are paying for it that we're going to do what they voted for. When we know, when we looked at the polling data on what was important when it was passed, the things that are the convention center, for instance, would have died without the rail. It would have died without the sidewalks. We wouldn't be talking about a convention center. And I think we've got an obligation to pay back to those people that were willing to buy a convention center, buy $250 million convention center to get $10 million worth of sidewalks. We need to build those sidewalks for them, in my opinion.
And I understand that completely. We've been asked by a number of the subcommittees to consider economic development impact, and we mentioned that the last time we presented to City Council that would be something that would be available, and frankly, it will be available for consideration on April 19th, but it's City Council's ultimate decision about how much influence that has on any given project.
I don't mean to say that economic development is not important. I just think it's subordinated to the desires of the people that provided the majority of the votes that passed this thing.
Yeah. Well, I would wholeheartedly second what Pete just said, and that is a fact.
Well, I guess my view is that it's all economic development. I don't differentiate some of these as being economic development, some of them not. I just think some of them are more difficult to quantify how you come to the dollars. So,
well, there's something though that as we're talking about some of these, something that was brought up at the 11th hour during MAPS that has not been mentioned. That's the public safety element. I mean, how does that play with any of this?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, there's no discussion. We haven't had any discussion about the public safety aspect of any of the money being spent in that area, which was talked about during MAPS 3.
You're talking about the use tax?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's not part of this discussion.
So will there be at any point that will be brought up and discussed, other than just matter of fact? I mean, will we have an idea of how that's going to be spent over the...
Well, certainly, we spent MAPS 3 use tax for public safety, for police and fire officers this budget year.
I understand that. But going into the future, is there going to be any discussion on how that's going to be used?
Yeah, will be a council discussion at some point in the future, absolutely.
I think I got one more, well, actually, these two slides, I think we've covered most of this. It's just some highlights about why individual projects were placed in the program order the way they were. I think we've covered most of that. Next steps, April 19th, we've already discussed the joint workshop with the Citizens Advisory Board. The next step after that would be an anticipated approval of the implementation plan by City Council, followed in June with the beginning of trying to engage some additional consultants to work on individual projects to get those projects moving forward. And that really is the conclusion of our presentation. Are there any additional questions?
Okay. Other than thanking Mike for all the diligence and the hard work that went into this, any other comments?
Now, I personally appreciate this very much. This is the kind of update we needed. It's well done. I like the timeline idea where it's laid out, where I can, and actually I like the big one where old people can actually see it compared to the little one that
we wished we could make it even bigger so that people like me could read it.
I have to have my granddaughter read it for me, the rest of it. But
what is the council process? At some point, do we vote on this to accept it as our plan?
Yes.
Okay, and when will that be forthcoming?
After the workshop. The workshop will get more input from the council, and hopefully we'll bring a consensus at that time. Then we'll memorialize it, bring it back through the subcommittees, and bring it back to council for adoption.
And I would just remind the council that if you do come forward with suggestions on moving things up, that you've got to also come up with a suggestion on moving something back, because it's there's only so much dollars available, and we can't move everything to the front. There's going to be 8 groundbreakings and 8 ribbon cuttings, and they're not all going to be on the same day. Yes, Larry.
Question on the process, Jim. The council will have the final approval on the implementation plan.
Yes?
But it will be brought before the Oversight Committee
That's correct.
for its consideration.
That's correct.
And the Oversight Committee will bless some implementation plan to pass on to us.
On all items, we're anticipating the oversight, or the advisory committee will make a recommendation to the council, and the council will make the adoption thereof.
And so therefore, as we go along, I think, correct, Mayor, if this is appropriate, would it be appropriate for the council, since I'm the representative on the advisory committee, if you have some questions as this process goes on, suggestions you'd like brought before the attention of the advisory committee, give them to me and I will feed them on to Eric and to the advisory committee?
No, I think that's appropriate, absolutely. And Larry, by the way, as you're winding up your first year, on behalf of the council, I thank you for sitting into those meetings and serving as our liaison in that order. It's been great.
Mayor, just one thing really quickly. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention to council the hard work that has gone into this project on the part of the subcommittees, the advisory board, and city staff. We didn't do this alone. We had a lot of really good help, and thank you for that.
Mike, I just have one other question. You mentioned earlier that with some of the timing of some of these projects that one of the obstacles was contractors. Are we facing, in your opinion, a shortage of contractors if we were to start moving some of these projects, of having to look outside of the state of Oklahoma, or?
No, I actually mentioned that in conjunction specifically with trails and sidewalks. Trails and sidewalks, there are some specialized contractors in town that do that, and do it all the time, but if the scope of the contract gets too large, it sometimes has an impact on limiting particularly people who are capable of doing trails contracts. So that's one of the reasons we decided to break this into phases.
Okay. We have some people that have signed up to speak, so we want to move on to this.
Just a process on the next meeting, and I won't be there, but on the joint meeting, because my...
You can come.
I can come? All right. Can't ask any questions, though.
Sure you can.
My point to you ask, will the advisory people be there just to hear council input, or is it a joint working session?
I anticipate it to be a joint working session.
Okay, good.
Great. Mike, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, Mark Gibbs. Morning, Mark. We will need your name and address for the record.
Sure. Mark Gibbs, 601 North Broadway. I'm with Urban Neighbours, Modern Transit Project, and the Maps Free Transit and Modern Streetcar Subcommittee. I just want to clarify an important issue, I believe, that came up at the last council meeting I spoke at before Christmas. I'm from South East London originally, and that accent is frequently confused with the Australian accent. You may choose to think that I'm stupid, but I want to point out that I do not in any way regard Russell Clowes as stupid. There's obviously a lot of work to come, as you've just been talking about, to firm up this schedule and to go through and approve it, and that we believe that council and board workshop will be important, and there'll be continuing discussions around that. We just wanted to say a few words from the Transit Subcommittee, as myself here and a couple of the other members here today, and also I'm sure I can speak for the committee. Our opinion is this is excellent work. We think it's a realistic and practical and technically well thought out schedule in terms of at least our project. And I'd like to thank the work done by Mike and Nicole and the city staff and Eric and his team in particular. As I said, it makes the most sense technically. There's certain things that have to go forward now. The most important thing, once you approve this, apparently in early June, would be to appoint a specific consultant for the streetcar project who would go ahead and do preliminary engineering. That's very important because out of that process, and that could take up to a year, there can be coordination with the final phases of Project 180 to make sure that we get the best bang for the buck when we go in on those streets in Project 180. There is work on the propulsion system, and there'll be a lot of work determining that, determining what type of propulsion system before you can then go forward and start procuring the vehicles. Also, we like the fact that it's done in 2 phases. I think the first phase makes that realistic 4-mile, I would call it route, I would not call it loop. I'm very wary of the term loop or ride. We are evolving a route that's looking like it would be some kind of northwest, southeast orientation, linking Bricktown, the downtown core, Automobile Alley, and Midtown. That's a standalone phase. Included in that would obviously be the car barn, the maintenance facility. Then you've got time to go forward after that and see about extending it further if the exact 2 miles is what you do then have to play with. Another important aspect of that first year's preliminary engineering is to determine the exact cost. There may be some of the track mileage. There may be some issues with the Sheridan Street Bridge that may dictate what route we can take and what the exact cost per mile is. Is it 20 million per mile and so forth? But we're well aware of the challenge from the council to extend the system beyond the greater downtown area, and that would be presumably what would come in that second phase, as well as in relation, as was discussed, with possible federal funding. And I know the AA process is looking at a possible route that may take more of a east-west access towards the Health Science Centre. So, as I said, there's a long way to go, but again, I think they've done great work so far. I do want to bring up a few other points that have come up today, and I'd like to thank the Mayor for providing clarification about the additional 10 million. There's 120 million for the streetcar, but then the 10 million specifically addresses commuter rail infrastructure and other rail-based projects, and I know that some of us have been looking at some very creative solutions that could be possibly use some of that money. I mean, there's a lot more work to do, and indeed those solutions could be very creative in that they would be purely within the city of Oklahoma City and not perhaps more dependent on the longer-term work being carried out by the regional transit dialogue, which of course requires relationships and work with the other cities. Also, I'll say a few personal words. We believe that the schedule for the streetcar is realistic. We're happy. We knew we couldn't be the first. We knew that the nature of the work, especially lead times, would mean that we would be somewhere in the middle. But I'd just make a few words. I believe we'll stack up strongly. The streetcar will stack up well in terms of direct economic development. But there's also other quality of life issues that I'm sure you're going to be considering. I mean, when the Mayor speaks about economic development in general, that's how the first MAPS project came about, because the perceived quality of life was low and we lost the United maintenance contract, and that's how the first MAPS came about. So as the Mayor says, every project has an impact on economic development, as well as the general quality of life for the people that are paying for the tax. And I do strongly agree with Councilman White, is that I would hope that the council would be taking into the account the preferences of the voters and the people that will be paying for the tax. And then lastly, I just want to give a quick plug. I thought we were going to be on the schedule today, but the streetcar committee has come up with a preferred route at this stage based on the information available. An important point to consider will be that's the information we have available today. As we go into preliminary engineering coming down the line, there may be some revisions to that route. But it's my understanding that that's gone through the subcommittee, it's being received by the board, and it's my understanding that will be going forward to be received by you next week.
That's correct.
And I'd like to say that the transit community and the general public as a whole are very excited about this. The transit committee's been meeting twice a month to get this far and provide important piece of information that means that Project 180 planning can go forward at this stage. So I'd like to thank you for your time, and I think there's a lot of great work ahead. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Robert Harris? I'm sorry, Robert, this is under citizens to be heard, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, if you'll have a seat, then we'll wrap up this part of it. It'll just be shortly. I apologize for calling you up. Any other comments on the MAPS 3 conceptual project order? Okay, we'll conclude city manager reports.
Mr. Bowman already talked about the sanitary sewer reports, so that concludes our reports.
Okay. Now we're on citizens to be heard. Robert Harris. And we'll need your name and address for the record, please.
Robert Harris, 2009 Northwest 29th Street. I'm here today on behalf of George Noble's property at 1140 Northwest 97th. It was issued a order to clean up the property. I was in the process, but there was a snowstorm. Remember the snowstorm? They sent him a bill. The problem is that they sent it to him instead of me, and I know we need to work something out. So if there's a problem with the property, I know and it doesn't take 2 weeks.
Well, are you
before he-
working with our city staff on this issue?
Well,
you're kind of hitting us cold on your specifics, and so I want to make sure you're getting the help you need, and we may not be the people you need to be talking to.
He told me like 2 weeks after he got the notice.
Uh-huh.
So by that time it already snowed, and I told him I'd do my best to get the property cleaned up.
Okay, yeah, I bet you need to speak with Charles, and you can do that out in the hallway unless there's some reason you want us to hear your conversation.
Well, if the deal is, if the owner pays, the amount was really excessive for what little they did, and if the owner pays it, I lose this contract, and I'm already, my company's kind of a side company.
Uh-huh.
I have a regular job, and I do this on the side, and I'm just kind of limping along now. If I had to pay this $1,200,
Charles, you want to come forward? Are you aware of the issue he's talking about?
I'm not familiar with the
I think you're probably going to
case,
have to
but I'll
visit
be
with
more than
Charles a
happy to
little
talk
bit
to
more
him.
in depth than we're going to be able to respond to you today. Are you under some sort of time limitation where there's an emergency?
Well, the owner wants me to get this taken care of because, like I said, if he pays it, I'm done, the contract's over.
I think Charles is going to be able to help you. I can't imagine it's going to be an issue that the council could address today anyway, because it wouldn't be on the agenda if it took action.
Okay.
Okay? If you'll just visit with Charles, and you're always welcome to come down under citizens to be heard, but I think he can help you more than we can.
Okay.
All right?
All right, thank you.
Thanks for coming down. Sky Care? Kays? Oh, Hayes. I knew who you were. I just didn't recognize the penmanship. Go ahead, Sky.
Kind of surprised you that I'm up here talking to you. I'm Sky Kays. I'm the president of the Fraternal Order of Police. Live at 1624 South, my address is 10624 on Sundance Drive. I was giving you my business address for a second.
Okay.
I want to thank Councilman Mars for requesting the information in reference to the proposed signal light at Sarah and Expressway. I've lived in that area since '05. I worked that area as a patrol lieutenant in a selective traffic enforcement program. I know how dangerous it can be. My youngest daughter, on Friday the 25th, was involved in the accident. She glided with a Kenworth tanker truck, projecting her vehicle to the west, and I'm very thankful that she is alive, the driver of the Kenworth is alive, and neither were burnt. Councilman Mars and myself are very familiar with how horrific it is when a human being is subjected to severe burns. I responded that day along with my wife, and it was truly a blessing that there were no serious injuries from the event. I've talked with several of my friends in the area, neighbors, city staff that knows me and my family, and members of this great community. This council does a fabulous job looking out and taking care of its citizens and their traffic needs. This is a very dangerous area that is having a considerable amount of population buildup, and I would just thank any consideration that this council would have in expediting a signal light going into that area. I just wanted to again say thank you to the members of the city staff, this council, and my friends and colleagues here at the city, and my neighbors who have expressed concerns over the safety of my daughter and the driver of the Kenworth. And again, just publicly thank God that both my daughter and the driver survived the incident.
Yeah, could the council get an update on exactly where that is in the process?
I just got through talking to the Public Works Director, and it has in fact been approved by the Traffic Commission as we suspected it was, or I'd heard it was. So now but it is unfunded. It's a matter of finding funding for it at this time. So we'll be in discussions on that, but the fact that it has been approved was...
Gary, would you suggest that this is something that needs to be moved to the top of the list?
Well, the problem is out there for a long time on Northwest Highway. After the State Department of Transportation widened and resurfaced Northwest Highway, you have a light at County Line Road, and you don't have another light until you get to the Surrey Hills area. And it's a racetrack out there. It's a long, straight, very nice paved stretch of road, and the people just naturally use it well in the excessive speed. So, yes, I think it's something. We had an accident, I don't know, a week or so before this tanker crash that was a fairly significant accident, and basically the same thing, somebody trying to pull out off of Sarah Road on the Northwest Highway. So I think it's something we certainly need to see if we can find some dollars for somewhere now that the Traffic Commission has approved that.
Estimate on the cost?
And that's going to get worse, that situation out there, because there's a lot of development along the Northwest Highway. And traffic's going to increase significantly. And I think the problem here points to the flaw we have in the way we fund traffic signals. The Traffic Commission approves them, unfunded, and then we wait till the next GO bond issue to raise money for them. And that's just too long to wait. In a lot of instances, the time between the problem is presented, acknowledged, and funded is just too long.
And I don't like the idea of one part of the city bumping to the front, because each of you has a similar situation in each of your wards. But based on that accident, I wonder if we shouldn't just make an exception and see if we can't get this one funded earlier. But I would like to know what we're talking about in dollars-wise. Typically, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars for a traffic light.
Probably $100,000 if we look at the one at the west end of Surrey Hills.
Why don't you bring some sort of city manager report to the council on this specific issue?
Well, and I'll give you a list of also the other unfunded traffic lights so you can see where we're at and what our challenges are.
Mr. Mayor, as a police lieutenant, a member of this community, and somebody who loves this city, I don't want any other part of the city to be placed in a dangerous situation to come before this. I care about all the citizens, just as the Fraternal Order of Police does. We have Sundance Air Park that's just north of there, and Councilman Ryan is correct that area is building up. And just like Councilman Mars said, I've worked the selective traffic enforcement program out there. It is a very nice flat stretch of road that just begs to be accelerated on. What I would like for this council to do is to do what they've done in the past. Look at the priorities and needs of the citizens of this great city, and when funding becomes available, look at your priorities and decide where best you spend your money so that the citizens are served properly and they're as safe as possible. And when you have the fundage available and can put a signal light out there, I would greatly appreciate it. And again, I thank you, Councilman Mars, for looking into that. And on behalf of my family and my daughter, I'm just very thankful that she survived and the driver of the Kenworth did too. And I would appreciate any consideration you have in the future in reference to this matter.
All right. Thanks, Scott. We do not have any executive session. Anyone else here to be heard? Everybody ready to adjourn? All right, we're adjourned.